My sister-in-law wants to replace the baby she lost with mine, and she's getting help from my brother and mother who are actively looking for ways to portray me as an unfit mother. I am 26 years old and just had my first child 3 weeks ago. My son, whom I'll call Daniel, was born perfectly healthy. My 28-year-old husband Phil and I have been together for 5 years and married for 2. The problem began a few months after I announced my pregnancy. My 32-year-old brother Herbert and his 29-year-old wife Thaisa had been trying to have children for 3 years. Thaisa had 2 miscarriages in the first year and then nothing for a while. Last December, she became pregnant and carried the baby for 7 months before losing it. It was devastating for them, and we were all heartbroken by her loss. When I told the family about my pregnancy, Thaisa immediately left the room. Herbert followed her, and they didn't return. My mom later told me that Thaisa cried for hours that night. I understood her pain, but I couldn't hide my pregnancy forever. I preferred they hear it from me rather than someone else. Things got strange after that. Thaisa started sending me articles about pregnancy complications and stillbirths. She would call my mom asking detailed questions about my health and doctor visits. When I went home for Christmas, she kept touching my belly without asking and making comments about how she would care for the baby better than anyone else. My mom raised Herbert and me after our dad died when I was 12. She has always been protective of her children, but she has a special affection for Herbert because he stayed close to home while I moved away for university and work. She also adores Thaisa and treats her like the daughter she never had. After Christmas, my mom started having strange conversations with me. She asked if Phil and I were truly ready to be parents since we both worked long hours. She questioned if we had enough money saved and if our apartment was big enough. She kept mentioning that Thaisa works part-time from home and would have more time for a baby. I thought she was just worried about me, a first-time mother far away from family. Then in February, when I was 8 months pregnant, she called me with a crazy proposition, but one that seemed to come from my family. Since Thaisa was going through a very difficult time after her loss, her grief counselor suggested that being around babies might help her heal. My mom wondered if Thaisa could stay with us for a few weeks after Daniel was born to help with the baby and bond with him. I told her absolutely not. That's when she revealed the real plan. My mom said Thaisa and Herbert had been discussing adoption options, but they were expensive and had long waiting lists. Given that I was young and had my whole career ahead of me, perhaps it would be better if Thaisa and Herbert raised Daniel. They had a house with a yard. Thaisa could be a full-time mother, and they were more mature and financially stable. I hung up on her. The calls started the next day, not just from my mom, but also from Herbert. He said Thaisa was barely eating or sleeping. She had turned the guest room into a baby room and was buying clothes for him. He was worried about her mental health and thought that having a baby to care for could save her. In fact, he said I would be helping Thaisa heal and giving Daniel a better life at the same time. He asked us how we could give a child the attention he deserved. I told Herbert that he was our son and we weren't giving him away, no matter their arguments. End of discussion. The pressure intensified over the following weeks. My mom would call crying about how Thaisa was wasting away from grief. My aunt, my mom's sister, also started calling. She said the whole family was worried about Thaisa and that I had the power to help her. Thaisa herself never called me directly, but she started commenting on all my social media posts. When I posted a photo of the baby's room, she commented that she had chosen the same crib. When I posted about buying baby clothes, she said she had already bought newborn and 3-month-old outfits. The breaking point came when I was 33 weeks pregnant. Thaisa and Herbert showed up at our apartment unannounced one Saturday morning. Phil was at the grocery store, so I was alone when I opened the door. Thaisa pushed past me and went straight to the baby's room. She started rearranging things and talking about how she would set everything up in her house. She had brought a car seat and said she wanted to make sure it was installed correctly for when they took Daniel home. I told her she needed to leave. That's when she completely broke down, knelt in the baby's room, and begged me to give her my son. She said God had taken her son because she was meant to have mine. She promised she would let me visit him and be involved in his life. Herbert tried to calm her, but she screamed about how unfair it was that I had a healthy baby when I didn't even want him as much as she did. She said I was too young and selfish to be a good mother. I called the police. By the time they arrived, Phil had returned and managed to get Thaisa to stop screaming. The officers took statements but said it was a family matter. They suggested we get a restraining order if we felt unsafe. Daniel was born 2 weeks later. We didn't tell my family I was in labor. My mom found out through someone I don't know who. The calls started immediately. My mom cried about missing the birth of her grandson. Herbert was angry that we hadn't included him, but it was Thaisa's reaction that worried me most. She called from Herbert's phone, and when I answered thinking it was him, she started talking about how excited she was to finally meet her son. She said she already had his room ready and had requested time off work to be with him full time. I realized she truly believed Daniel was going to be hers. Phil and I decided to cut off all contact with my family for now. We blocked their numbers and set our social media accounts to private. My mom has been sending letters and packages to our building, but we've returned them unopened. I learned through a cousin that Thaisa has been telling people at her church that we are going through a difficult time and that they plan to adopt our baby. She has been asking for donations for baby items and has set up a baby room that she shows visitors. My mom has been telling relatives that we are being influenced by Phil's family. She says Thaisa just needs time to bond with Daniel and that everything will work out. I never expected my own mother to support someone else's claim to my child. I thought family was supposed to protect each other, not conspire to take what matters most. Phil has been incredible throughout all of this. His parents live across the country but have been very supportive and offered to help us move if necessary. They were shocked when I told them what my family was doing. We are considering moving before Daniel gets older. I don't want to live in fear that my brother and his wife will try to take him. The hardest part is grieving the family relationships I thought I had. I believed my mom would support me no matter what. I thought my brother would protect me and be excited to be an uncle. Instead, they chose Thaisa's delusion over my rights as Daniel's mother. Phil believes we should involve a lawyer, which we don't have yet, but we are looking. Update 1. Daniel is now 11 weeks old. Luckily, this update is not directly about him or anything bad that has happened to him. It's about my family who are still acting crazy. A month ago, I decided to contact my mom's church pastor. The pastor has known our family for years and officiated Herbert and Thaisa's wedding. I thought he might be able to help Thaisa understand that what she was doing was not healthy. He listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, he told me that he had noticed concerning behavior from Thaisa, but he hadn't realized the full extent of what was happening. He told me that Thaisa had been coming to him to try to heal from her grief, which was normal and healthy. What worried him was that she had started talking about a baby who would soon be joining their family. When he asked for details, she would only say that God already had something prepared for her. The pastor thought it was just her faith speaking. Now he knows it's deeper than that. The pastor said he would talk to Thaisa and Herbert together and try to make them understand that their current path was not healthy for anyone. He also offered to mediate a conversation between our families if we were willing. I agreed to give him 2 weeks to work with them, and then we would reevaluate. The first week passed in silence. There were no calls, unexpected visits, or packages. Phil and I began to hope that professional intervention would help Thaisa face reality. But then the pastor called with an update that made everything worse. He had met with Herbert and Thaisa 3 times. In the first meeting, Herbert seemed to understand that their plan was unreasonable. He admitted that Thaisa's grief had clouded his judgment and that they needed to respect our decision to keep Daniel. But Thaisa's response was completely different. She insisted that I had asked them to raise Daniel because Phil and I weren't ready to be parents. She said our cutting contact was just temporary stress and that we would eventually change our minds once we realized how difficult parenting is. The pastor told me that Thaisa had detailed plans for Daniel's baptism, his first Christmas, and even his first day of school. She talked about him as if he already lived with them. In the second meeting, the pastor tried to help Thaisa understand that Daniel belonged to his parents. Thaisa became agitated and accused him of not understanding God's plan. She said her baby had died so that she could raise Daniel. In the third meeting, Herbert completely changed his attitude. Instead of acknowledging that their plan was unreasonable, he began to defend Thaisa's right to expect a family. The pastor told me he would end his counseling relationship with them and recommended they seek professional help elsewhere. He was concerned that Thaisa's grasp on reality was weakening, not strengthening. He also revealed something that chilled me to the bone. Thaisa had been showing up at the church nursery during services and was helping with the babies. She started referring to a particular baby as practice for when Daniel came to live with them. The baby's parents asked her to stop holding their child, but Thaisa insisted she was just helping. The pastor had to ban her from the nursery, which caused a scene that the entire congregation witnessed. After hearing this, Phil and I decided we needed to take more serious precautions. We changed the locks. I don't know if they might have had spare keys. 2 weeks after the pastor's call, we received confirmation that our precautions were necessary. Our neighbor knocked on the door one Saturday morning. The neighbor, who lives across the hall and has always been friendly, told us that a woman had been asking about us in the lobby the previous evening. She wanted to know our work schedules and when we left the apartment. The neighbor noticed that something about her story didn't add up and refused to give any information. From her description, we knew it was Thaisa. We also discovered that Thaisa had been posting in local parent groups on social media. She was asking for advice on how to introduce a baby to a new home and talking about adoption timelines. I have screenshots of some posts before Thaisa deleted them. In one, Thaisa asked how long it typically takes for biological parents to adjust after giving a child up for adoption. In another, she asked the best way to transition a baby to a new caregiver without causing trauma. A cousin also told me that my mom had been calling relatives asking if anyone had heard from us. She was telling them that we were dealing with postpartum depression and needed family support, but we were too proud to ask for help. My mom was portraying herself as the worried grandmother who just wanted to help her daughter through a difficult time. She didn't mention Thaisa's demands at all. Phil and I realized we needed to be more proactive. We drafted a letter to my mom, Herbert, and Thaisa, making our position absolutely clear. We stated that Daniel would remain with us permanently and that any attempt to take him or interfere with our family would result in legal action. We sent the letter via certified mail to have proof that they received it. We also kept copies in case we needed them later. Phil and I began looking for apartments in other cities. We weren't ready to move yet, but we wanted to know our options. We also consulted a family lawyer specializing in custody and protective orders. She reviewed our documentation and said we had grounds for a restraining order if Thaisa made any direct contact or threats. Ideally, we wouldn't need it, but in an ideal world, I wouldn't have a family of baby-stealing lunatics like this. Update 2. Daniel is now 7 months old and has started crawling. Yes, on the walls too. He's like a spider-woo baby. Phil and I have found our rhythm as parents, and I returned to work about 3 months ago. Everything had been quiet regarding the family until last week, which made us let our guard down because we thought things had improved. My cousin called me Monday night with news. My cousin works as a social worker in the county where my mom and Herbert live. Someone at her job was assigned a case involving a couple reported for attempting to illegally purchase a baby. When my cousin started digging deeper, she was surprised to discover that the couple was Herbert and Thaisa. Herbert and Thaisa had been working with someone they met online who claimed to connect birth parents with adoptive families. They had already paid several thousand in fees and were waiting for a baby to become available. The person they were working with turned out to be running a scam, taking money from desperate couples while pretending to arrange adoptions that would never happen. Several other couples had also lost significant sums to the same fraud, but the most disturbing part was what the investigator found in Herbert and Thaisa's home. The nursery wasn't just decorated for any baby. It was specifically prepared for Daniel. They had printed photos of Daniel taken from Phil's social media and placed them in frames around the room. Thaisa had been buying clothes in the exact sizes Daniel would need as he grew. She had even created a photo album documenting his first months as if she had been there all along. The investigator also found a detailed timeline that Thaisa had created showing when she expected Daniel to come live with them. She had marked dates for when she thought we would realize we couldn't handle parenthood and when the transition would happen. My cousin said the social worker who took the case described the situation as one of the most elaborate delusions she had encountered. Thaisa truly believed that Daniel belonged to her and that everything she was doing was preparation for his inevitable arrival. Herbert completely supported Thaisa's delusion. He had been researching grandparents' rights laws to involve my mother and looking for legal ways to challenge our custody. He had even consulted with lawyers about what grounds they might have to argue that we were unfit parents. The county closed the investigation after determining that Herbert and Thaisa were victims of the adoption scam, not perpetrators, but they referred Thaisa for a mandatory mental health evaluation due to concerns about her perception of reality. My cousin told me all this because she was worried about our safety. The social worker had recommended that Herbert and Thaisa not have contact with children until Thaisa received appropriate treatment, but there was no legal mechanism to enforce this recommendation. After my cousin's call, Phil and I had a long discussion about what to do next. We realized that we needed to take immediate action to protect Daniel and ourselves. The next day, we met with our lawyer and provided her with all the new information my cousin had shared. Our lawyer was alarmed by the magnitude of Thaisa's planning and recommended filing a protective order immediately. She also suggested thoroughly documenting Daniel's current living situation in case Herbert and Thaisa tried to make false reports to Child Protective Services. We took photos of our clean and safe home and gathered documentation about Daniel's medical care and our job stability. On Wednesday, we received the protective order prohibiting Herbert, Thaisa, and my mom from coming within 500 feet of us or our apartment. The order also prohibits any contact through third parties. Although it's a temporary emergency order, we thought this would finally put an end to the situation, but we were wrong. On Friday afternoon, my mom showed up at Phil's workplace. She somehow got past building security and confronted him as he was leaving. She was crying and begging him to reconsider keeping Daniel away from his family. She said Thaisa was getting worse instead of better, and that seeing Daniel might be the only thing that would help her heal. My mom even asked Phil how much money it would cost to allow Thaisa to spend time with Daniel. She offered to pay our rent and childcare if we only allowed supervised visits. When Phil explained that Daniel was not for sale and that Thaisa needed professional help, my mom got angry. She accused Phil of turning me against our family and said he was destroying Thaisa's last chance at happiness. Phil recorded the conversation on his phone, which was smart because my mom later denied saying most of those things. Eventually, building security escorted my mom off the property, and Phil's company filed a police report since she had violated the protective order. That weekend, we made the decision to move. We had been considering it for months, but this incident convinced us that staying in the area was not safe for any of us. Phil's company has a branch in another state and agreed to transfer him immediately given the circumstances. My company allows remote work so I can keep my job while we relocate. We are not telling anyone in my family where we are moving. My cousin knows we are leaving the area, but we will not give her our new address. We love her for trying to help us, but we cannot risk the information getting to the others. The hardest part of moving is accepting that this situation will not resolve itself. Thaisa's delusion has only worsened over time, and my mom and Herbert are enabling her instead of getting her proper help. I keep thinking about the photo album my cousin described with pictures of Daniel's milestones that Thaisa had collected and organized as if she had been there. The level of fantasy and planning involved is terrifying. Update 3. Daniel is now 15 months old and walks everywhere. Yes, even up the walls. He's like a spider baby. We've been in our new city for 4 months and finally feel like we can breathe normally. Phil loves his new position, and I don't mind working remotely, although I know it limits my career growth opportunities. That's why I'm looking for something local. For the first few months after we moved, I still had that sense of dread that something would happen, but gradually the constant anxiety has faded away. 2 months ago, my cousin called with an update that brought some closure to the situation. Thaisa had been hospitalized after what Herbert described to relatives as a nervous breakdown. My cousin didn't have details about what triggered the hospitalization, but Thaisa was admitted to a psychiatric facility for 3 weeks. During Thaisa's treatment, Herbert finally began attending counseling individually. According to my cousin, Herbert admitted to the counselor that he had been so focused on helping Thaisa with her grief that he had lost perspective on what was reasonable. Apparently, Herbert told the counselor that he knew taking someone else's baby was wrong, but Thaisa's pain had been so intense that he convinced himself they were helping everyone involved. He said he had genuinely believed that we would eventually realize we couldn't handle parenthood and that we would be grateful for their intervention. The counselor helped Herbert understand that enabling Thaisa's delusion had actually prevented her from processing her grief in a healthy way. Instead of facing the reality of her loss, Thaisa had created an elaborate fantasy that allowed her to avoid dealing with her suffering. After Thaisa was discharged from the hospital, she and Herbert moved to another state where Thaisa's sister lives. My mom has apparently struggled with the aftermath of everything that happened. Several relatives have distanced themselves from her after learning about her role in pressuring us to give up Daniel. My cousin said my mom has been telling people that she was just trying to help everyone and that the situation got out of hand. She claims she never intended for things to go that far. But my cousin also told me that my mom had been researching grandparents' rights laws. Like Herbert, she had consulted lawyers to see if she could argue that we were unfit parents due to our age and work schedules. Apparently, my mom thought that if she could build a legal case for the family to have custody, we would eventually agree to let Thaisa raise Daniel rather than face a trial. She truly believed that this was a reasonable solution that would make everyone happy. Knowing this confirmed that our decision to move was the right one. My mom had not only emotionally pressured us, but had actively worked to undermine our parental rights. My cousin asked if I wanted her to pass along my mom's request for contact to try to rebuild our relationship. I told her no. We are planning to have another baby in the next year or 2. When we do, no one from my original family will know about the pregnancy until we decide when to share the news. Phil's parents visit us regularly and have become wonderful grandparents to Daniel. They are everything my family should have been, and were not. I know some people who read this might think I should have tried harder to help Thaisa overcome her grief or given my mom another chance to prove she had changed. But I cannot leave my son near someone whose reality was so altered. Children are not therapeutic tools for adults struggling with loss. Daniel's job is just to be a happy, healthy child, not to heal someone else's trauma or fill another person's void. The restraining order is still in effect, although we haven't needed it since we moved. We keep copies of all documentation in case we ever need legal protection again, but I hope we never do. Moving across the country to escape your own family is not something anyone plans, but sometimes it is necessary. Update 4. The plan was to have another child in 1 or 2 years from my last update, but well, sometimes you don't plan and you get pregnant again, so we are expecting a second child, a son or daughter. It's not exactly unplanned, but it did happen earlier than we anticipated. Either way, we're fine with it because they'll grow up closer in age to Daniel than we expected. I am 2 months pregnant, but that's not the only thing I've come to tell you. My brother and Thaisa have divorced. Well, rather, they've started the process, but they are going through with it. Herbert is living with my mother now from what I know until he finds something for himself. Thaisa has stayed under the care of her parents. I haven't seen her in a long time, but although she is improving, she is still struggling with her issues. Part of me feels bad for her, although I also remember how she made my life a living hell during my pregnancy. My mother has been trying to get one of our relatives to give her information about me to reunite the family, but some people don't have that information or haven't wanted to give it to her. My mother remains an unpopular person within the family because of everything she did. I don't know about my brother, but it's possible he's helping. We feel safe. The people who know where we are won't say anything. We are also severely limiting who knows about the pregnancy. Sooner or later, they will find out. But I hope it will be later rather than sooner when my second child goes to college if possible. I'm sorry if you were hoping for a happy family healing update, but I don't think I'll ever have one of those for you. I don't think I can forgive my mother or my brother for what they let Thaisa do. I even see Thaisa as the victim because if they had gotten her help instead of feeding her delusions, all of this could have ended differently and I would never have written this story.